Hey there, story lovers, this is Multiverse Harry, and we're bringing you an epic adventure. Harry died at age 4 and Thor carried his body to Odin, and the Allfather sent him back as a true Asgardian. Hit like, subscribe, and let's begin this journey. Chapter 1, What the Boot Made the Smell came first. Shoe leather, old and cracked, the particular sourness of rubber soles that had walked through other people's lives and tracked the evidence of it back into small, dark spaces. Mildew. The specific mineral cold of a concrete floor that the central heating of the house above never reached. These were the first facts of Harry's world, not color, not sound, not the faces of people who loved him, but the smell of a space that had been decided for him before he was old enough to refuse it. He was 4 years old. He knew this in the way he knew other things, not from being told, but from the accumulation of evidence. He had seen Dudley's birthday, the enormous architecture of cake and wrapping paper and relatives arriving with their arms full. He had counted privately the months since, using the school calendar on the kitchen wall that he was not supposed to touch. He had arrived at 4. Nobody had confirmed this. Nobody had offered to confirm it. The camp bed was 6 inches too short for the space under the stairs if you included the pillow, so Harry slept without the pillow, and the pillow lived at the foot of the bed and served as a shelf. On it, one book, which was Dudley's discard, which was missing its cover and the last 4 pages of whatever story it had been trying to tell. Harry had read it 11 times. He knew all the words in it, including the ones he did not understand, and he carried them the way you carried tools before you knew what they were for, patiently, in case the use presented itself. He was awake. He was usually awake at this hour, which was the hour after the house went quiet, after Uncle Vernon's television programs ended and Aunt Petunia finished in the kitchen and Dudley was hauled to bed with the degree of ceremony that suggested the hauling was the point rather than the bed. The house had its own quiet, the particular quiet of a structure that knew what it contained, and Harry lay in it and listened to it the way he listened to everything, with the complete attention of something that had learned that attention was the best available armor. Outside, a car, distant. A fox somewhere behind the garden wall making the sound foxes made when they were talking to whatever foxes talked to, the boiler ticking. Inside the cupboard, the bar of yellow light under the door, which meant the hallway light was still on, which meant the bolt slid. Harry did not move. His eyes opened, and that was all the eyes, nothing else, the rest of him still and flat against the too-short bed, watching the bar of light widen into a wedge and the wedge fill with Vernon Dursley. Vernon was wearing the clothes he had come home in. He had not changed. He had gone from the car to the sitting room to the television to here without changing, which was not his routine, which told Harry that the television had not done the thing it was supposed to do, which was to make Vernon Dursley feel that his life was acceptable. There were evenings when the television worked and evenings when it didn't, and Harry tracked them with the same care he tracked the school calendar, not because he could predict what happened next, but because prediction was the only tool available to him. The smell of whiskey reached the cupboard before Vernon's second step. "What did you do?" Vernon said, not a question. Vernon's voice never went up at the end. Everything he said arrived flat, with the authority of a thing already decided. Harry understood this about him, understood that the questions were not questions, that the performance of seeking information was in fact the performance of demonstrating that no information Harry offered would be accepted. He said nothing. He lay still and looked at a point on the wall above Vernon's left shoulder. "The neighbors," Vernon said. He took one step in. The ceiling above him was low and his bulk required him to angle slightly, and this physical constraint, the house reminding him of Harry's presence in it through the mechanism of its architecture, registered in his face as it always did, as fresh outrage, as if the inconvenience were deliberate. Petunia had to speak to them on the doorstep in front of the house. He took another step. The camp bed creaked when Harry pulled his knees in, not quickly, carefully, drawing them up and holding them, making himself as small as the geometry allowed. "On the roof of the shed," Vernon said, his voice had found the register, the wet, low register that operated below the frequency of performance. This was not the voice for the neighbors or the visitors or the people at his office. This was the voice for the cupboard, sitting on the roof of the shed like he stopped speaking. When Vernon stopped speaking mid-sentence, it meant the sentence had reached the word he specifically wanted, and he had decided the word was better kept than said, because the saying of it required him to acknowledge what he thought it meant, and the thought of what it meant was the source of all of this. The cupboard, the too small bed, the bolt on the outside of the door. Freak was the word. Harry had heard it often enough to have its shape memorized. He had held it up against himself in the dark and tried to find where it fit, the way you tried to fit a key that was supposed to be yours but made no sense in the lock. Vernon raised his boot. Here was what Harry knew in the 3 seconds before it happened, that the shed roof incident had not been deliberate. That he had been standing beside the shed pulling weeds from the concrete surround, because pulling weeds was Tuesday's task and Tuesday had not changed its schedule just because Vernon was home early and in a particular mood. That something, some current, some not quite physics, had moved through him the way electricity moved through a wet thing, finding the path of least resistance, and the path of least resistance had been upward, and for 4 or 5 seconds he had been 4 feet above the concrete looking down at the weeds. That he had not asked for this, that it did not matter whether he had asked for it. Vernon's boot was size 12. Harry weighed 35 pounds. The impact was not dramatic. Violence at this scale was not dramatic in the way that films. Harry had never watched films, but Dudley watched them constantly and Harry had heard them through the wall suggested violence was. It was immediate and absolute and it had nothing to say about itself. It happened the way a structural failure happened, all at once, past the point of recovery, with a brief terrible sound that was not quite the sound that anything should make. The yellow bar of light from the hallway stayed very still. The shoe with the hole at the toe lay at an angle. Harry was 4 years old and he weighed 35 pounds and the world inside him. The word collection, the careful attention, the private arithmetic of the school calendar, the 11 readings of the incomplete book, the 4 years of learning to read weather in a man's face went out. Not slowly, all at once, like a lamp. What remained was not nothing. This was the important thing, the thing that the Allfather would understand 3 hours later when he put his hand on the boy's forehead and the single remaining eye went very quiet. What remained when the physical housing failed was not silence but signal, a charge, clean and enormous and operating at a frequency that had no name in any Midgardian taxonomy. The magic that had lifted a 4-year-old above a concrete shed floor, the magic that had deflected a killing curse 3 years before this night and left a scar shaped like a lightning bolt as its record. The magic that had been building in the architecture of a small body with nowhere to put itself and no language to describe itself. That did not go out with the lamp. It released. It released the way a spring released when the mechanism holding it compressed finally gave way, not with intention, not with direction, but with the sheer accumulated force of years of pressure suddenly without housing, suddenly without the ordinary biological limits that housing imposed. Went up through the floor of the hallway, through the plaster and the joists and the insulation, through the roof tiles and the dark air above them, and it propagated outward and upward, and it had the frequency of a child's magic at its most fundamental register, the bright cascading brightness of it, a particular acoustic signature of Sather in its raw form, and it had one additional quality that made it different from every other magical release of its kind in the history of Midgard. It was ending. It was a beginning frequency doing an ending thing. It was a live wire cut. Above Surrey it rang. Thor was not at that moment thinking about anything specific. This was unusual for him. He was, by disposition, a thinker, not in the subtle, lateral manner of Loki, who thought the way water found downhill paths, always moving, always around obstacles, always towards some lower point he had decided on in advance. Thor thought in straight lines, which looked simple and was not. A straight line required you to know where you were and where you were going and to commit to the path between them with your whole weight. Loki had always called this stubbornness. Thor had spent several centuries deciding that Loki was not wrong but was missing something, and that the thing he was missing was the specific power of an undeviating course, how a straight line, maintained under pressure, became a force that bent the world around it rather than bending itself around the world. But he was not thinking this. He was 40,000 feet above the M25, moving south along the curve of the electromagnetic field that ran the length of Britain, and he was not thinking anything at all. He had been in this particular condition, wide, empty, attending to nothing specific, which was attention of a different and more comprehensive kind, for approximately 3 hours, which meant he was overdue for it to end. When the frequency hit him, his whole body turned south before his mind had processed what he was turning toward. He dropped. Through cloud cover, cold and saturated, the temperature dropping 20 degrees in the seconds of descent. Through the lower atmosphere, where the smell changed from the clean thinness of altitude to the complicated organic mess of human habitation, petrol and cut grass, and the particular English smell of stone that had been rained on consistently for several thousand years. Through the last layer of cloud and then the town, he pulled up, hovered, scanned the frequency had come from. He found the street, found the house, dropped again, this time in a controlled descent, landing on the garden path of number 4 without sound. He was capable of this when he chose it and stood for a moment reading the air. The frequency was there, it was here. It was this house, this structure, this ordinary beige curtain box that looked like every other box on this particular road, and the frequency was the one he had already categorized in the descent, the bright cascading ending sound of a child's magic leaving the world. He went through the front door. He went through it because the front door was closed and locked, and this was not the moment to knock, and the door was not, in any meaningful sense, an obstacle. He stepped through it and stood in the hallway, and the hallway light was on, and at the end of the hallway Vernon Dursley was leaning against the wall with the particular quality of a man who has done something and is in the process of deciding how he feels about having done it. Thor looked at him once. That was enough. He looked at him with the specific attention of someone cataloging a thing in order to return to it when the immediate priority was addressed, and then he turned to the cupboard door which stood open and went to it. He crouched. Later, not immediately, not then, but later, when he was standing at the forge's entrance with Odin while the blue fire cooled, he would describe what he saw. He would describe it in the plain declarative sentences that were his default for things that mattered most, because decoration was what you put on things you weren't sure of, and he was sure of this. He would say he was small, he was so extraordinarily small, and his face, he had seen the faces of the dead. He had been at the side of warriors who died in battle, had held them, had felt the precise moment when the person left the body and the body became something else. He was not unfamiliar with death. He was intimate with it, as all long-lived things were intimate with it, not comfortable because no one was ever comfortable, but acquainted, aware of its specific texture, the particular quality of a face when the person had gone out of it. This face was a child's face. That was what he had not been ready for, though he did not know what he had been ready for instead. This was the face of a 4-year-old with no particular expression on it, not peaceful, because peaceful was a lie people told about death to make it easier to be near, simply absent. The absence of a 4-year-old from their own face, the remainder of features that had been, briefly, in service to a specific small person and were now simply features. He put one hand on the boy's chest, nothing under his palm. He put his hand on the side of the boy's neck, the way the Aesir's healers had taught him, because for all his centuries he had refused to stop learning basic medicine on the grounds that the knowledge of how to preserve life was more important than the dignity of admitting you didn't already have it. Nothing. He found the scar on the boy's forehead. Old, white, entirely healed, the shape of a lightning bolt, which was not the shape scars made when they were made by ordinary means, which told him everything about what had made it and when and what that meant. He had been here before in some form. The universe had kept a record of it in the boy's skin. Gathered the boy up, he rose. Vernon Dursley was still in the hallway. He had not moved, which was less a choice than a condition. He was a man who had been large and certain his entire life, and what was in the hallway with him now was not large in the merely physical sense, was not certain in the merely human sense, and the particular combination of these qualities had produced in Vernon Dursley a complete suspension of function. Don't, Thor said. It was the only word available that covered all the things he would otherwise have done. At the end of the hallway, Petunia Dursley in her nightgown, her hands at her sides. The shape of a scream that had not yet committed to itself. She looked at the boy in Thor's arms, at the small, limp, absolute absence of him, and she looked at her husband, and her mouth opened. This child, Thor said. He looked at her because looking at Vernon again was the one option he was choosing, deliberately, with the full authority of everything he was, not to take. He looked at Petunia instead. This child was under your care. Her hands moved. She touched the doorframe the way a drowning person touched something solid, not to stabilize, but because the body went looking for surfaces when the ground failed. The word was there. He could see it in her face, the word that was her husband's word, the one that had been doing the work in this house for years. She did not finish the sentence. Do not finish that sentence, Thor said. She didn't. He turned. He walked through the front door. On the garden path of number 4, Privet Drive, in the particular gray dark of an English night in summer, warm enough that the roses were still going, cool enough that his breath made a brief cloud, Thor stopped. He stood on the concrete path with the boy in his arms, and he looked at the sky, and the sky was overcast, heavy, the low, thick cloud cover of a country that had committed to rain and was working up to it. He called Mjolnir. It came from the field where he had left it spinning 40,000 feet up, through the clouds, through the lower air, through the dark above Privet Drive, and when it hit his palm, the crack of its arrival was the first thunder of the evening. The sky above the street went white once hard for half a second. The fox on the garden wall fell off the wall and ran. The car alarms on Privet Drive began one by one. He was already moving. The Bifrost from the earth end opened blue-white and enormous, and to Mrs. Fig at number 7, who was up with a bad knee and happened to be at the kitchen window with a glass of water. It looked for approximately 4 seconds like the sky above Surrey was conducting a conversation with itself, using a vocabulary of light she had no frame for. She would report this to Dumbledore in the morning. He would listen to her report with the expression he had for things that had already happened and could not be changed, patient, grieved, very still. Thor ran the bridge, the corridor of it in grief, the light at the edges that tried and didn't quite manage. The sound of it, usually a music, a polyphony, a physical expression of arrival, doing the other thing, the quiet thing, the long corridor thing, and Thor walking it with his boots loud on nothing and the boy absolutely still in his arms and the cold of the between place fitting itself around them both. He ran at its speed and it still took longer than it should have. Asgard arrived, gold. The city in the last of the night, the hour before dawn when the towers caught the light at the angle that made them look like burning, and the air was cold and thin and tasted of the particular mineral distance of an eternal realm, not the distance of emptiness but the distance of scale, of a thing built to the dimensions of 9 worlds rather than 1. Heimdall was at his post. He was always at his post. He was at his post in the way that certain mountains were at their posts, not because they chose to remain but because remaining was what they were, the deep identifying truth of their existence. He was at his post and the bridge was already open, had been open since Heimdall saw what was coming and moved before Thor landed on the earth end. Because Heimdall saw further than that, had been seeing since before the thing happened, since the seconds before it happened, since Vernon Dursley's boot. His face when Thor cleared the bridge was in absolute stillness, not the stillness of composure, the other kind. Heimdall, Thor said. I see him, Heimdall said then. I saw it happen. Did you? Thor started. I was already moving, Heimdall said. When I opened the bridge you were already in the air. I saw it as it was occurring. It was 4 seconds, 4 seconds. Thor made a sound that was not a word in any language. He walked past Heimdall and Heimdall let him go and said nothing else, because there was nothing else to say that was not already said by the 4 seconds. The ravens were circling the high spire, the doors were open, the throne room at the scale it was built for. The ceiling at the height of clouds, the columns older than most things, the floor of it continuous and pale and very cold, and at the far end the throne not a seat of comfort, a seat of axis, the point around which a certain portion of the universe's administration organized itself, and on it Odin, the Allfather. One eye because the other was the price of a particular knowledge, and the trade had been made and was not regretted. White hair and white beard and the face of something that had been doing what it did since before the current shape of the universe, and had the face that made. Not cruelty was a thing of heat, of urgency, of something that needed to prove itself. Odin had been proving himself since before the concept of proof existed. His face was something past all that, settled. Cold as deep water, the specific authority of a thing that has never needed to raise its voice because its voice was already the room. He watched Thor cross the floor. Thor walked it the way he always walked it, directly with his whole weight, the straight line. His boots on the stone were the only sound in the throne room because the ravens had come in from their spire and were roosting in the high dark of the vault and were not calling. Ravens did not call when they had already told the Allfather what was coming. He stopped at the base of the steps. He looked up. Look at him, Thor said. Odin was looking. Thor held the boy up, not presented, not offered, simply made visible, made unavoidable, made the subject of whatever conversation was about to happen regardless of any other agenda. His name is Harry Potter. His parents were killed 3 years ago by the Darksaber practitioner who marked him. You see the scar, father, you see what made it. And when his parents' killer attempted to finish the work, the curse returned on the caster, and the boy survived with the scar and nothing else. And the wizarding kind of Midgard have been calling him their savior since before he could speak. Thor's voice was doing things he could hear it doing and was not able to stop. The grain of it, the lateral stress, he was placed in that house by their architect, by design. With the full knowledge of what the house was and who was in it, put there as a strategy, and kept there. And this is, he stopped, he looked at the boy's face and then back at his father. He was 4 years old. I heard you, Odin said. Did you? Before you spoke, Odin said. Hugin Munin, a pause. The ravens in the dark above them, rustling once, Thor's jaw, the working of it. He has the scar, Odin said. I noticed. You know its origin. I know what a failed killing curse leaves, Thor said. I have studied the dark practices of Midgard's hidden caste. I know the mark it makes when it rebounds. I know that a rebounded killing curse does not simply vanish. It needs somewhere to go, father, and the somewhere it went was. Inside him, Odin said, the words in the throne room, landing where they landed. A soul fragment, Odin said. Not with alarm, because alarm was not Odin's instrument, with the precision of diagnosis. The Sather practitioner who cast the curse was not merely a practitioner. He was a practitioner who had done to his own soul what should not be done to any soul, divided it deliberately, housed fragments of it in objects, committed acts of specific and profound darkness to achieve the division. When the curse rebounded, one of those fragments required new housing, and the nearest available vessel, he paused, was the child. Thor's knuckles were white on the haft of Mjolnir. The stone floor at the hammer's foot had developed a crack that was spreading slowly in the silence. Can it be removed? Thor said. Not from a mortal body, Odin said. The extraction would destroy the vessel before it destroyed the fragment. The fragment survives the mortal failure. It is stubborn in this way. It was made to be stubborn. Then what? Odin descended. He came down from the throne in the measured way he moved, each step the weight of a decision already made, and he came to the floor of the throne room and crossed it to where Thor stood, and he stood before Thor and he looked at the boy. He reached out one hand, he touched the scar on Harry's forehead with one finger, the single eye closed. In the silence, the ravens stopped moving, the crack in the floor stopped spreading. The very particular quality of Asgard's air, the mineral cold, the distance taste of it deepened, the way air deepened before a storm when the pressure was changing. The eye opened. There is a fragment, Odin said, and there is a soul, and the soul is, something moved across his face. Something very brief and very specific, a thing that was not cold and not calculating, and that was gone almost before it was there. Intact, he said, entire. The fragment has not touched it. This is remarkable. He withdrew his hand. This child burned with the force of a practitioner 4 times his age. The magic in him is the fragment could not touch it because the magic would not permit it. The magic was too alive. He paused. It still is. He's dead, Thor said. The body is dead, Odin said. The charge remains, the soul remains. The fragment remains parasitic, waiting for a new vessel. He folded his hands. It cannot remain where it is. Then the forge, Thor said. Yes, and after the forge, Odin said, there is a choice. I can return a soul to the Sather, a formless return, the magic redistributed into the broader field, the soul to whatever continuation a wizard's soul is promised. He did not look away from Harry. Or I can give the soul a new housing, built in the forge, Asgardian in its making. He would not be mortal, no, he would remember, Thor said, not a question. He was looking at his father and he knew his father and he was asking the specific hard question, the one that mattered most, the 4 years. Everything in that house, he would carry it. He would carry it, Odin said, I will not take it. What was done to him was done and it is his. Taking it would be a mercy I have no right to perform. It would mean making a choice about what he deserves to know about his own life. I will not do that. His voice was level, archaic, measuring each word before it was spent. I will give him bone that does not break under boot weight. I will give him the strength to stand in the memory without the memory standing on him. I will not erase it. Thor looked at his father. He looked at him with the full attention he gave to things that required full attention, not scrutinizing, not weighing, but seeing. He had spent 600 years learning the difference between the face his father showed the court and the face his father had, and he was looking at the second one now. Do it, Thor said. Odin turned to the forge stairs. There is one more thing, Odin said without turning back. The soul fragment will be destroyed in the process. When it is gone, the wizard who made it will be diminished in ways he is not expecting. And the architect of Midgard's wizarding war, the one who designed the boy's captivity, has built his entire strategy around the fragment's eventual extraction. He believes when the time comes that the boy must die to destroy it. A pause on the stairs. He is a meticulous man. He will adapt. He will look for another way, the measured steps continuing down. Ensure the boy understands this before he goes back. He will understand everything, Thor said. I will tell him everything. Odin's voice came up from the dark at the base of the stairs, already receding, already turning toward the blue fire and the work that waited there. Tell him enough, Odin said. He is 4 years old. Tell him what he needs. The understanding will come from the living of it. 8 years was a number that meant less in Asgard than it did anywhere else. Time in Asgard was not the time of Midgard, not the relentless, single direction, cost everything as it passes time of mortal life. Time in Asgard moved differently in the forge, differently in the training yards, differently in the feast halls where the stories accumulated in the walls until you could almost hear the previous generations breathing. 8 years in the forge under the Allfather's will, with a soul learning new bone the way a musician learned a new instrument. Painstaking, demanding, requiring repetition and failure, and the gradual building of a relationship between the player and the thing being played, was not 8 years of suffering. It was 8 years of becoming. Harry was not present for it the way he would be present for the years that followed. He was present the way a seed was present in the ground, enclosed, working, doing the necessary work of becoming without the conscious participation of the thing becoming. He knew afterward that it had happened. He knew the shape of it the way you knew the shape of a room you had been in with your eyes closed, through the evidence of your own position within it, through the record your body kept of where it had been. What he knew when he woke, and waking was the wrong word, but it was the word available, was Thor. Thor was the first fact of the new world, not Asgard's gold, not the forge's residual heat, not the enormous sky above the palace with its two suns and its specific light. Thor, sitting on the top step of the forge staircase with his elbows on his knees and his red beard catching the light in the way that red things caught Asgardian morning light, fully, without reservation, making the most of it. He looked up when Harry came up out of the dark. He did not say anything for a long time, and this was the right choice, and Harry recognized it as the right choice because the first moments of the new world needed to be inhabited before they were described. Thor looked at him. He looked at him the way experienced soldiers looked at the aftermath of a battle they had both survived, cataloging, present, not rushing the reckoning. He looked at the height. Harry was 12 in Midgardian count, and he stood like 12 Asgardian years, upright and inhabiting the space without apology. He looked at the red-brown hair, the color of iron through fire, catching the light the way Thor's own hair caught it. He looked at the face, James Potter's jaw, Lily Potter's green eyes, and underneath these familiar inheritances something else, something newer, the thing the forge had added, the thing that had no human or Asgardian antecedent but was simply the record of a soul that had refused to be erased and had been given the means to make refusing mean something. He looked at the scar. He held Thor's gaze when he found it, the long look of someone who is not going to pretend the looking isn't happening, and then looked up and met Harry's eyes. "You're the one who carried me," Harry said. His voice was not 12. It was the voice the forge made, low, resonant, with the quality of a struck thing still vibrating, still full of what had been put into it. Not deep. He was 12, the depth would come, but dense, the way iron was dense, with no empty space inside the sound. "Yes," Thor said. "He told me," Harry said, "the Allfather, he told me what happened, what you did." Thor was quiet. The forge below them had gone to its cooling register, still blue, still present, but the urgency of the working gone out of it, the fire settling into the patient burn that was its resting state. "He told me about the fragment," Harry said. "Did he tell you about the man who will come?" Thor said. "Dumbledore," Harry said the name the way he filed the name with the care of something that would be used. "Yes, he told me." And Harry looked at him, the green eyes unchanged by forge or god or Asgardian years, still exactly the green they had always been. In them, the architecture of what had been done to him, not absent, not healed over, not processed into clean grief. Their present load-bearing built into the structure of the face that held them. "I'm going back," Harry said. Thor had not been ready for this. He had been ready for questions about Asgard, about training, about what came next in a sequential and practical sense. He had not been ready for this, for a 12-year-old newly forged thing coming up out of the dark and saying "I'm going back" with the same intonation he might use to say north is that direction. "Back," Thor said. "Privet Drive." A long pause. The forge cooling tick of ancient metal settling, the distant sound of Asgard above them, the city going about its day, the yardmasters calling, the clang of training steel somewhere over their heads. "Harry," Thor said carefully, "you should understand what you will find there, the wizarding world has." "I understand what I'll find," Harry said. "I know about Dumbledore's plan. I know what he thinks I am. I know what he arranged and why." He paused. "I need to see the house from this height." Thor said nothing. "And I have things to say," Harry said, "to the people who were in it." Thor sat with this for a moment. He turned it over the way he turned things over, not laterally, not looking for angles, but end over end, feeling the weight of it from each position. He was looking at a 12-year-old who had been through the forge of the Allfather, and was standing at the top of the staircase in the early Asgardian morning speaking about returning to the site of his death with the calm directness of someone who had been planning this for 8 years, and had not found a single reason not to. He sat down on the top step. This brought them level eye to eye, and he looked at Harry and Harry looked at him, and what passed between them was not quite a language but was not less than one. "When you go back," Thor said, "the wizarding world will move. You understand this. Dumbledore has watchers. He has a network he will know before you reach the end of the street. I know. And he will come to you with grief on his face and good intentions in his voice and the greater good in his pocket, and he will try to." "Put me back," Harry said. "Not in the cupboard," Thor said. "He is not that kind of man." He will try to put you back in the design. He will explain the design to you with such, Thor searched for the word. Warmth, he said, with the faint distaste of someone handling something he finds slightly slimy. He will explain it with such warmth that it will feel like he is giving you something rather than taking it. He's going to tell me I'm special, Harry said, that I have a destiny, that the war needs me. Yes. I know about the prophecy, Harry said. The Allfather told me its shape. Neither can live while the other survives. He said it without drama, without the weight that Dumbledore would one day try to give it, said it as information, as a known constraint. That's true. I'm going to end the war, not because Dumbledore designed it, because Voldemort killed my parents and put a piece of himself in a 4-year-old, and someone should answer for that. Thor looked at him. On my terms, Harry said, the forge below them cooling, the city above them going about its day. The Asgardian morning coming in through the staircase entrance, gold and cold and tasting of permanence. Thor reached to his belt. He found the stone smooth, gray, unremarkable, the size of a river decision, and held it out. Strike it once, he said, hard. It will call me. Harry took it. He weighed it in his palm. He turned it over once. You'll come, he said, before the sound stops, Thor said, the green eyes, looking at him with the thing that had no clean name, not love, not quite. They had known each other for the length of this staircase and 8 years of waiting. Not gratitude, which was too small. The recognition of two people who have been standing in the same weather and have noticed each other noticing. Thank you, Harry said, for carrying me. Thor's throat did something. His eyes did something. He would not describe either of these things later, and no one who knew him would ask, because no one who knew him would need to. Always, he said. The Bifrost threshold was gold beneath his boots, and the sky ahead of it was the color of a door about to open, and the bridge stretched out before him like the question, "Are you sure?" He was sure. He was 12 years old in Midgardian count, with Asgardian bone in his back and lightning-forged iron in his blood, and the memory of a cupboard under the stairs perfectly preserved inside him, not softened, not processed, not made into something he could deliver with clean distance. There and load-bearing, his to carry. The Allfather had given him the carrying of it, which was the most honest gift anyone had ever given him, because honesty was the only gift that held. He had the stone in his pocket. He had the scar on his forehead. He had the green eyes that were the same green they had always been, because the soul had not changed, had been rehoused, had been given new bone and new capacity, and the Allfather's profound, archaic, unsentimental care, but had not changed. He was still the child who had counted months on a school calendar and learned words he didn't know the use of yet, and watched weather in a man's face because weather was the only warning available. It just wasn't small anymore. The bridge opened beneath his feet, and the colors of between places cascaded around him, and he dropped through them without looking back. And the clouds above Surrey were already doing the thing they did when something large was coming, gathering, darkening, finding their shape, rolling in from the west with the patience of weather that has all the time in the world, because weather is not hurrying for anyone. He hit the cloud cover. He dropped through it, cold, saturated, the smell changing as it always changed from altitude clean to Midgard's complicated organic argument. He came out below it, gray English morning, summer technically, the particular gray gold of a British summer that had not committed to sun and was not going to. Below him, a town. Below the town, a street. Below the street, a cul-de-sac of identical houses arranged with the particular geometric devotion of people who had decided that conformity was the same as safety. His feet found the pavement. The pavement held. The impact of his landing sent a concussive wave along the ground, not dramatic, not a crater, but felt, in the soles of feet behind closed doors, in the vibration of window glass, in the sudden decision of every bird on Privet Drive to be somewhere else. They went up, all of them, from every tree and every hedge and every telephone wire, in the radiating explosion of wings that meant the electromagnetic field had just altered, and the field was the bird's most fundamental sense, and the birds had opinions about the alteration. The car alarms began one by one down the street. Harry stood up. He was home. It was absolutely and completely terrible, and he was home. And the thunder came down out of the sky behind him like a declaration that had been building for 8 years and had decided this was the moment, and the street lay before him, gray and tidy and exactly the size it had always been, which was to say small, which was to say that the smallness was the thing that had shrunk, not the street. And at the far end of the cul-de-sac, number 4, Privet Drive. He walked toward it. The thunder rolled behind him and the telephone wires sang above him, and the morning held its breath. And number 4 did not move, because houses did not move, but the gnome in the garden, the ceramic gnome with the painted smile, developed in the vibration of his footsteps on the approach, a hairline crack in the paint across the smile's left corner. He stood at the gate. He put his hand on it. He pushed it open. The sound of the gate's hinges, that small, specific, known forever sound, went up into the gray sky and dissolved. He was 12 years old, he had been dead, he had been reforged by the Allfather in a fire that was older than Midgard. He remembered every hour in the dark under the stairs, every count on the school calendar, every word from the incomplete book, the shoe with the hole at the toe lying at an angle in the yellow light. He walked up the front path, he raised his hand, he knocked. Chapter 2, The Thunderforge Comes Home. The birds left the trees on Privet Drive before Harry reached the end of the cul-de-sac. Not the startled kind of leaving, not the explosive, panicked scatter of something loud arriving suddenly. This was the other kind. The kind that happened when the electromagnetic register that birds tracked in their blood and their hollow bones shifted at a frequency below human hearing, and every nervous system with feathers on Privet Drive reached the same conclusion simultaneously and voted with its wings. They went in all directions, starlings from the hedges, a pair of wood pigeons from the oak at number 8, the sparrows that had colonized the guttering of number 12 for 3 summers running. Gone. The trees they left stood absolutely still in the windless morning, stripped and quiet, like trees in a painting made by someone who had never liked birds. The telephone wires hummed, not the electrical hum of infrastructure doing its job, the other frequency, the one that had no exchange at its source, the one that ran through the wires the way a current ran through a wet thing, finding the conductor, using it, indifferent to its original purpose. The wires swayed without wind, the static built in them visibly as weather built in the sky, and the sky was doing its own building, the clouds coming in low and purposeful from the west, organizing themselves above the cul-de-sac with the patient intention of something that had been given a direction and was committed to it. Mrs. Fig had been at her window for 3 days. She was there now, at the front window of number 7, with a mug of tea that had gone cold an hour ago, in the particular posture of a person who has been waiting for a specific thing and has spent the waiting time rehearsing their reaction to it, and has now discovered that rehearsal was not preparation. Her cats were in the kitchen, all 6 of them under the table in the configuration that she had learned over 23 years of proximity to the hidden world, meant that the hidden world was about to become briefly visible. She saw Harry come off the end of the street, and she put her mug down. He was not what Dumbledore's files had prepared her for. The files had extrapolations, careful, scholarly attempts to model what Asgardian bone structure did to a child with Harry Potter's genetic inheritance, what 8 years of divine forge time produced in a 12-year-old body. The extrapolations were accurate in their dimensions and wrong in everything that dimensions could not capture. They had the height right, they had the build roughly correct. They had not captured the way he moved, which was the way structural things moved, with weight, with the quiet authority of mass that has made its peace with gravity and uses it rather than fighting it. Each footfall on Privet Drive's pavement was not loud, it was definite. The pavement received it and transmitted it, and the transmission ran outward through the concrete and the tarmac and the foundations of the identical houses, and the houses received it and said nothing, because houses did not have the option of saying nothing and meaning something, but their windows vibrated very slightly in their frames, and that was close enough. His hair was the color of iron through fire. It moved in a light that the gray morning was not making. Mrs. Fig reached for the phone on the wall beside the window. Harry did not look at her window. He walked past number 7 with his eyes forward and his chin level and the thunder building in the clouds above him, and Mrs. Fig dialed the number she had been told to dial, and the phone rang once before it was answered, and the voice on the other end was unhurried and warm and already grieved. "I see," Dumbledore said. "Thank you, Arabella." She watched Harry reach the end of the cul-de-sac. She watched him stop at the gate of number 4. She watched him put his hand on the gate, one hand, unhurried, and push it open. She picked up her cold tea and looked at it and put it down again. The house looked the same. Harry stood on the front path and looked at it, and it looked the same in every dimension available to looking. The hedge trimmed to its regulation height, the curtains in their particular cream, the car in the driveway newer but parked in the same spot with the same precise distance from the garage door that spoke to Vernon Dursley's relationship with order. The gnome in the garden with its painted smile, the brass lion knocker on the front door. The dimensions were correct, something else was wrong. It was small, not in the way that childhood places were supposed to be small when you returned to them as an adult, the nostalgic optical correction of the grown body looking at a space built for a smaller one. It was small in a different way. It was small the way something was small when you had been standing in halls built to the scale of 9 worlds and had come back to a hall built to the scale of Surrey property values. The smallness was not the house's fault. It was simply a fact about the proportion between this house and the thing that had walked up its front path, and the fact sat there in the gray morning air and did not apologize for itself. Harry walked up the front path. He raised his hand and knocked twice. The sound of it, the lion knocker against the brass plate, carried, not loudly, with the particular resonance of something struck by a hand that knew how to strike, and the sound went into the house and through it and came back to the door and kept going, the way a bell's sound kept going after the bell had stopped moving. Inside, stillness. The particular loaded stillness of a house that has heard something and is deciding how to respond. Then footsteps, deliberate. The footsteps of someone who had decided in the moment of hearing the knock that they would walk to the door the way they always walked to the door, at the pace they always used, in the posture of someone for whom a knock at the door was an entirely ordinary event that required no particular preparation. The footsteps of performed normalcy. The door opened. Petunia Dursley. She was 51 now. The years had given her the lines that the particular combination of tension and suppression tended to produce, not deep, not dramatic, but arranged in the specific pattern of a face that had been doing the same work for a long time without adequate rest. Her hair was as it had always been. Her blouse was pressed. She had been awake since before dawn, and she did not look like it, which was its own kind of achievement. She looked at Harry. She looked at him for a long time, at the height, the build, the red-brown hair catching light that wasn't there, the face with both parents in it and something else now, something that was neither James nor Lily but was entirely his own. She looked at all of it with the expression of a woman who had spent 8 years telling herself she was prepared for this and discovering, in the 3 seconds of actual looking, that preparation was a story she had told herself to get through the telling. She found the scar. Her face did something that she did not instruct it to do. A single small movement, not dramatic, not theatrical, in the vicinity of her mouth and eyes, the brief evidence of an interior thing that did not have public permission. "You," she said. "Yes," Harry said. She looked at his height again. She looked at the doorframe. She looked back at him. "You should come in," she said, the brittle register, the voice for the performance of normalcy under conditions that were actively hostile to normalcy. She was applying it at full strength. "There's tea." "All right," Harry said. He stepped over the threshold and had to duck just slightly. A single degree of forward lean to clear the top of the doorframe. He noticed this with no particular expression, the way you notice the geometry of a space you were passing through. He filed it with the other geometric information, the ceiling height of the hallway, the width of the corridor, the dimensions of a house built for a family that had not included him. The kitchen of number 4 was the same kitchen, the same tiles in their pattern, the same refrigerator with the dent in the lower left door. The same clock on the wall running, the same table with its 4 chairs, one against the wall with the view of the garden. The smell of it, cooking grease and dish soap, and the particular warm staleness of a kitchen that had been producing the same meals in the same order for 20 years, was exactly the smell his memory had preserved. The memory was precise. The Allfather had left it precise. Harry sat down at the chair against the wall. The chair was significantly too small for him. His knees were at an angle that the chair had not been designed to accommodate. He sat in it anyway because the sitting in it was information he needed, the physical experience of the space that had been decided for him, measured against the body that had been decided for him in return. Petunia moved around the kitchen with efficient, unnecessary motion. The kettle, the cups, the cupboard for the tea bags, which was a different cupboard than it had been, she had reorganized at some point, moved things. Harry noted this without attachment. "Vernon is at work," she said. "I know," Harry said, a pause. "The kettle beginning its build. Dudley is at school," she said. "I know." She turned briefly from the counter and looked at him and turned back. The back of her neck had gone the color of someone running a calculation that was not resolving. "You look," she started, "like someone who didn't stay dead," Harry said. The cup in her hands made a sound against the counter. The involuntary percussion of a grip that had momentarily forgotten it was holding something. She set the cup down. She stood at the counter with her hands flat on its surface, looking at the garden through the window above the sink, and Harry looked at the garden too. And outside the garden was exactly as it had always been, the shed at the far end, its concrete surround, the weeds along the base of the fence that had always been his to pull. The shed's roof caught the gray morning light. "I never wanted," Petunia said. She stopped. She started again. When he left you, I didn't." Another stop. The sentences were failing her at their midpoints, which was where the difficult part of each sentence lived. "You took me in," Harry said. She nodded very slightly. "Because of the protection," Harry said. "Because Dumbledore left a letter telling you that your sister's blood meant the protection held as long as I was in your house." She did not answer, not with words, but her shoulders against the counter moved in a way that was not quite a nod and not quite a flinch and was in fact both. And because of the letter, Harry said, and because of what the letter promised, and because turning away a baby on your doorstep in November was a thing you couldn't quite bring yourself to do, he paused. You opened the door, a long silence, the kettle reaching its pitch and clicking off, the clock on the wall. I opened the door, Petunia said very quietly, and then you let what happened happen, Harry said. Not with heat, with the direct flatness of fact. Every day for 4 years, you let it happen. Petunia turned from the counter. She did not look at him immediately. She poured the tea with the precise attention of someone using a small task as a bridge across a large silence. She brought the cups to the table. She sat down, not in her usual seat in the chair across from Harry, which was not her chair, which placed her directly facing him in a configuration the kitchen table had never been used for. She looked at him. I was afraid of you, she said. Harry waited. Not of you, she said, and something shifted in her voice, shifted down below the brittle register into something that had not been aired in a considerable time. Of what you were, of what your mother was, of what it meant. I had spent 30 years being the one who wasn't, being ordinary. Being the one that the world was made for, the safe one, the one that nothing impossible happened to, and then you arrived on my doorstep and you were, she stopped. Her hands were around her teacup. Proof, she said, that everything I'd decided to believe about how the world worked was wrong, Harry said. Small, she said. And this word, which was clearly not the word she had planned to say, landed between them with more weight than the planned word would have had. Silence. My mother, Harry said, your sister, did you love her? Petunia's hands moved on the teacup. She looked at the table. She looked at her hands on the table. She looked at Harry with the expression that had no simple category, that was made of guilt and grief and the particular shame of someone who knows the honest answer to an honest question and has been avoiding both the question and the answer for years. Yes, she said. In the voice of something small and true being said out loud for the first time in a long time, which made it no less true and no less small and no less hers. Harry looked at her. Then you knew, he said, what it was to lose her, and you put her son in that room. Petunia's hands came off the teacup. She looked at the window. Outside, the garden, the shed, the concrete, the weeds along the fence. The gray sky above the shed's roof, which had begun to darken. She said nothing. There was nothing to say to this that was not either a lie or a confirmation, and she was, Harry understood, past lying. The brittle register had been failing since he walked through the door. What was underneath it was not comfortable or clean, but it was real, and real was what this kitchen required right now. He said it was necessary, she said, very quietly. Dumbledore, he said, the letter said that you needed to be here. That the protection required it, that without it you would be, that there were people who would come for you, that the war wasn't over, that you needed. She stopped. He made it sound like we were doing something important, like keeping you was a service, Harry said. She closed her eyes. He told you, Harry said, that the protection required you to provide a home. He did not tell you that a home was not a cupboard. He did not tell you that there was a minimum standard below which the protection became indistinguishable from the thing it was supposed to protect against. A pause. The humming of the telephone wires, audible through the window glass, very low, barely at the threshold. He chose this house knowing who was in it. He read whatever he read about the Dursleys before he made the decision, and he made the decision that this was acceptable, and he left. The window above the sink vibrated in its frame. Once, I know, Petunia said. You let it happen, Harry said. I know, she said again, smaller this time. The honest answer applied twice. Harry picked up his tea. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway, not because he wanted it, but because the action was a kind of punctuation, a marking of this moment as a moment that had been completed. He set the cup down. He looked at the garden. In the garden, the ceramic gnome with its painted smile had, in the vibration of the wires and the building pressure in the clouds above the house, developed a hairline crack in the paint that ran diagonally across the smile's left corner. Not broken, just cracked. The smile still legible but no longer intact. I want to see the cupboard, Harry said. Petunia did not take him to it. She stood at the kitchen door and watched him go, which was the correct instinct, Harry thought, the right reading of what this required. This was not a thing she could accompany him through. It was his. The hallway was the same hallway, the same light. The same slight smell of wood polish and the particular carpet that Petunia had chosen for its ability to not show dirt, which had a color that was the color of not showing dirt and nothing else. The door under the stairs at the end, the bolt. Harry stood in front of it and looked at the bolt. It was the same bolt, he could tell, not from memory exactly, but from the way memory and material confirmed each other. The bright scratches in the paint around the latch from years of use, the particular angle of the bracket, the wear pattern on the slide. The bolt had been moved thousands of times. The evidence was in the metal. He put one finger on it. Cold. Iron cold. The way small metal objects in unheated hallways were cold regardless of the season. He slid it back and opened the door. The smell hit him immediately and completely. Shoe leather and mildew, and the particular concrete cold of a floor that the central heating above never reached. His memory of this smell was precise, and the smell itself was precise, and they matched exactly, which was the most honest thing that had happened to him since he landed on Privet Drive's pavement, and maybe the worst. He crouched in the entrance. The camp bed was gone. In its place, a cardboard box of Dudley's discarded things, the handle of something bright and plastic visible over the top edge, 2 paint tins, a tennis racket with a broken string that had curled back on itself. The space under the slant of the staircase exactly as narrow as his body remembered it. The ceiling exactly as low. He looked at the far wall. One mark. One line scratched into the plaster at the height a 4-year-old lying on a camp bed would make it if they reached out with one hand toward the wall in the dark. Not deliberate, not decorative. Not distress made, not the frantic repeated scratching of someone trying to get out. Just one line. The trace of a small hand with nowhere to put itself, reaching for a surface in the dark because reaching for surfaces was what hands did when they had nothing else to reach for. Harry looked at it for a long time. He was very still in the entrance to the cupboard, crouched with his too large body at the edge of the too small space, and the thunder outside the house was not inaudible anymore. It was there, low and patient, rolling in from the west with the cadence of something that has been building for 8 years and is not hurrying because it does not need to. It was there in the walls, it was there in the floor. The clock in the kitchen was ticking, and above the clock's ticking was the thunder's underline, steady, constant, the way a tide was constant, not dramatic, not arriving, just perpetually in the process of arriving. He looked at the mark on the wall. He looked at it until he had the full measure of it. Until he understood what it was and what it was not. It was not a wound he could answer with thunder. It was not a thing that could be addressed with Asgardian bone or forge fire or the Allfather's decree. It was one line on a plaster wall made by a 4-year-old hand in the dark, and the 4-year-old was dead and the hand was new and the line was still there and would still be there after he left. And knowing this was simply the cost of the carrying that the Allfather had promised him he would carry. He was 12 years old and he knew this with his whole reforged body, and it did not break him, and that was what the forge had given him. Not the absence of the weight, the strength to stand under it without the standing being the whole of what he was. He straightened up. He closed the cupboard door. He slid the bolt home. He turned and walked back to the kitchen, and his boots on the hallway floor had the particular weight they had everywhere he walked, and the sound of them went into the walls of number 4 Privet Drive, and the walls received it and transmitted it, and the house was slightly different for having received it and would stay different, and that was enough. The knock at the front door came at 9:17. Harry had known it was coming with the certainty of geometry. He had arrived at the intersection of himself and Dumbledore's plan, and Dumbledore was a man who moved toward intersections rather than away from them. Dumbledore's watchers had been watching. Mrs. Figg's phone call had been made. The unhurried, warm, grieved voice had said thank you, Arabella, and had come. Harry went to the front door. Petunia had come out of the kitchen and was standing at the hallway's end again, the same position as 8 years ago, but different now, because the nightgown was a pressed blouse and the potential scream had been replaced by the expression of someone who had spent the last 20 minutes deciding something and was not certain of the decision but was committed to it. Harry opened the door. Albus Dumbledore. He was tall, genuinely tall, the kind of tall that was structural rather than performed. White beard, very long, half-moon spectacles, robes of a deep blue that was either very expensive or enchanted or both. And the eyes behind the spectacles, pale blue, sharp, the specific shade of a winter morning that had elected to be difficult. The eyes moved over Harry with the attention of a man who had been cataloging people for 150 years and had become extraordinarily good at it. He looked at Harry, and something behind the eyes did a rapid, comprehensive, invisible thing. "Harry," he said. His voice was warm, genuinely warm, not performed, not calculated into warmth from a cold starting point. Dumbledore's warmth was real, which was one of the most important things about him, because it meant that when he made decisions that were not warm, he made them not despite the warmth, but alongside it, and the warmth did not cancel the decisions, and the decisions did not cancel the warmth. And the two things existing simultaneously was the specific difficulty he presented. "My dear," he started. "Don't," Harry said. Dumbledore paused. "Don't call me that," Harry said. "You don't know me. You know what you designed? That's not the same thing." The grief in Dumbledore's expression deepened slightly, not performed. The grief of a man looking at the consequence of his choices in the body of a 12-year-old and feeling the weight of the consequence with full sincerity. Harry looked at the grief and measured it and noted that sincerity of grief was not the same as a reason to revise the choices that had produced it, and that Dumbledore knew this, and that the knowing of it was buried inside the grief in a place that made it almost invisible. Almost. "May I come in?" Dumbledore said. "No," Harry said. "Here." Dumbledore looked at him for a moment, the look of a man who has arrived with a particular strategy and is, in the first 30 seconds of contact with the other party, revising it, not abandoning it, revising. "Adjusting the approach to the terrain. You have changed considerably," Dumbledore said. "I've been reforged," Harry said. "There's a difference from changing." "Indeed." Dumbledore's hands were folded before him in the posture of someone who was comfortable with stillness, who used stillness the way some men used movement, as a claim on the space, as a kind of authority. "I must say your survival is extraordinary, and your transformation, the Allfather is," he paused. "A figure of immense power and, from what I understand of Asgardian theology, considerable care in his way." "I am glad," he said with great sincerity, "that he found you." "Are you?" Harry said, a pause the warmth held. "Of course," Dumbledore said. "You are alive, Harry. Whatever form that life has taken, whatever adjustments have been made to your circumstances, you are alive and standing before me, and that is." "You're glad I'm alive," Harry said. "You're also currently calculating what my being alive means for the plan." "Those two things are both true at the same time, and you know it." Something moved in Dumbledore's eyes. It was not quite being caught. Dumbledore did not have the facial architecture of someone who could be caught, in the way that a very old mountain did not have the architecture of something that could be surprised by weather. It was more like acknowledgement, the brief involuntary acknowledgement of an adversary's accurate shot. "You are," he said, "remarkably perceptive for 12. "I'm 12 with 8 years in the Allfather's forge," Harry said. "Tell me about the plan." Dumbledore looked at him. He looked at him the way he looked at things he was deciding how much to reveal, with the specific patience of a man who had never in his life felt that the other person in the conversation had a right to all of his information simultaneously. "There is a war," Dumbledore said. "I think you know this." "Voldemort," Harry said. "Yes, he is not at present corporeal. The events of the night your parents died, the rebounding of the curse, left him diminished, greatly diminished. But not destroyed." He paused. "He will return. This is not speculation. It is a certainty of the kind that I have learned over many decades to trust." "I know," Harry said. "And when he returns," Dumbledore said, "there is a prophecy. You are aware of this, I think." "Neither can live while the other survives," Harry said. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment, very quiet. The quality of his stillness changed slightly, became less performed, more actual. "The Allfather is thorough," he said. "He is," Harry said. "He also told me about the soul fragment." The stillness went total. Not dramatic, no visible reaction, no intake of breath, no change in posture. Dumbledore was too old and too skilled for dramatic responses to information. But the specific quality of the air around him changed, the way the quality of air changed around a very large structure when a load-bearing element was removed, not a collapse, but a perceptible, significant shift in where the weight was going. He looked at Harry for a long time. "The fragment," Harry said, "is gone. The Allfather removed it in the forge. Whatever he was making of me, the new housing, it couldn't include a foreign soul fragment, and the Allfather doesn't leave his work unfinished." He looked at Dumbledore with the green eyes that had not changed. "I know what your plan's ending looked like for me. I know that at some point, when you determined the time was right, when you judged that I was prepared, you were going to tell me that I carried a piece of Voldemort's soul and that the only way to destroy it was for me to die willingly." He paused. "And then you were going to trust that I would choose it." The morning light on Privet Drive, the telephone wires humming their single low note. Somewhere down the street, one of the evacuated birds had returned and was sitting on a fence post and reconsidering its decision. "You have clearly thought about this," Dumbledore said carefully. "For 8 years," Harry said. "There wasn't much else to do in the forge." "Harry," his voice dropped a register down into the genuine, the unperformed, the actual Dumbledore beneath the warmth and the strategy and the half-moon spectacles. "I want you to understand, everything I arranged, every choice I made was in the service of defeating Voldemort and ending the suffering that his return would cause. The suffering he already caused. Thousands of lives, Harry, families, children. I do not make the choices I make lightly, and I do not make them without grief," Harry said. "I know the grief is real. I can see it." He looked at Dumbledore steadily. "That's what makes you dangerous. A man who made these choices without grief would be a monster, and everyone would know it. Make them with grief, and the grief looks like wisdom, and so everyone listens." Dumbledore was very still. The fragment is gone, Harry said again. Destroy Voldemort without it. Find another way or don't, but the version of the plan that ends with me walking into his curse has been cancelled. He held Dumbledore's gaze without effort, not with challenge, not with aggression, but with the absolute steadiness of a thing that knew what it was, and had no interest in being mistaken for something less. The war is still real. I'm going to fight it. Not as your weapon, not on your timeline, not in the role you designed for someone smaller. Fury, there in him, the single named thing, the one the Allfather had left exactly where the Forge found it and built the new bone around, was not in his voice. It was in his stillness, the complete load-bearing stillness of something that had made a decision 8 years ago and was now simply living in the consequences of having made it. Dumbledore looked at him. He looked at him for the longest continuous moment of the morning, longer than the first look at the door, longer than the revelation of the fragment, longer than any of the prior assessments. He was doing something behind his eyes that was not calculation in the cold sense, was not simply moving pieces on a board. He was genuinely reckoning, genuinely encountering the difference between the Harry Potter of his plan and the Harry Potter on this doorstep and feeling the full dimensional distance between them. You intend to come to Hogwarts, Dumbledore said, not a question, a verification. Next year, Harry said. Yes, I want to understand the wizarding world before I move in it. I want to learn what they can teach me and learn the shape of what they can't. A pause. On my terms. And those terms, Dumbledore said. I don't go back to the Dursleys, Harry said. I don't live here. The blood protection is useful and I'll keep it functional. I'm not interested in handing Voldemort an advantage because I can't tolerate being in a suburb for 8 weeks a year. I'll visit, briefly. Enough to maintain the magic. He looked at Dumbledore. But I don't sleep under that bolt. I don't eat in that kitchen on their schedule. I don't perform gratitude for people who watched what happened and did nothing. Dumbledore's expression held its grief. You don't put me back in ignorance, Harry said. You don't decide what I need to know and when. You don't manage me the way you managed the version of me you were planning for. And if I find these terms difficult to accept, Dumbledore said, then I go back to Asgard, Harry said. Permanently, the soul fragment is already destroyed. Whatever Voldemort returns to, you fight him without a chosen one, without the power he doesn't know, and you work out a different ending. He held Dumbledore's gaze. You're intelligent enough to manage it. It will cost more. Many more people will suffer, but you'll manage it. He paused. And the power that Voldemort doesn't know about will spend the next 400 years in Asgard's training yards, and you will never know what it could have done. The bird on the fence post down the street took off again. Dumbledore looked at Harry. He looked at him with the full weight of 150 years of knowing people, of seeing into them, reading them, understanding what they wanted and what they feared and what they were capable of when the pressure was right. He applied all of this to Harry, and what he found there was, apparently, something he was not entirely prepared for, because the grief on his face deepened into something that was past grief, into the specific expression of a man who has been a great and powerful architect for a very long time, and has arrived at a morning when the building has made clear it will not be the building he designed. I accept your terms, Dumbledore said, not warmly, not with the voice he used for the greater public performance of himself, with the direct, undecorated acknowledgement of someone who has taken the accurate measure of a situation and responded to the situation rather than to his feelings about it. It was, Harry thought, the most honest thing Dumbledore had said since he arrived. Good, Harry said. Dumbledore reached into his robes, a movement so habitual and unhurried that it carried no threat, and produced a small envelope. He held it out. When you are ready, he said, to begin your engagement with the wizarding world, this will serve as an introduction. There are people who should know you, who can help prepare you for what Hogwarts will demand in ways that, he paused, in ways that account for what you are now rather than what I had arranged. Harry took the envelope. He turned it over, his name on the front in green ink, Harry Potter, the handwriting careful, old, the particular script of someone who had learned penmanship in a century when penmanship was an art. One more thing, Dumbledore said. He had not moved from the doorstep, had not stepped back, had not made any gesture of departure. He was looking at Harry with the eyes that were all the way down now, below the warmth, below the grief, at the very foundation of the man. The prophecy does not specify the method, he said. I want you to know that I had drawn conclusions based on available information. The fragment shaped my conclusions. Without the fragment, the parameters change. A pause. I do not abandon the possibility that there is a way that does not require your death to end this. Harry looked at him. I know, Harry said. I've known that since the Allfather pulled the fragment out. He paused. You came to the same conclusion later than you should have. You held onto the version that required my death because you needed a contingency you could control. The version without that contingency has variables you can't predict. He held the envelope. I am one of those variables. Dumbledore said nothing. I intend to remain one, Harry said, a long pause. The morning around them, gray still, the thunder in the clouds above the cul-de-sac settled into a rolling patience that had no urgency in it. Not threatening, not building to something imminent, just present. The way a tide was present. Extraordinary, Dumbledore said very quietly. Not to Harry, to the morning, to the record of the morning, to whatever internal accounting he kept of the things he had seen in 150 years and ranked by their capacity to surprise him. He turned. He walked down the front paths. He opened the gate and walked through it and turned left up Privet Drive with the unhurried pace of a man who had somewhere to be and was not afraid of not arriving. He did not look back. Harry watched him until he reached the corner and turned it, and then he looked up at the clouds above the cul-de-sac, at the dark, patient weight of them, at the particular quality of the light they produced, which was the quality of light that preceded something, and he stood in the doorway of number 4 for a moment with the envelope in his hand. Petunia was in the hallway. She had been there for the last portion of the conversation which Harry had known. She had not moved or spoken, and he had not required her to. Her presence had been its own thing, not eavesdropping, not surveillance, more like witnessing, like someone standing at the edge of something large to understand the scale of it. He turned from the doorway. She was looking at him with the expression he had come to know over the course of the morning, the one with no clean category, built from guilt and grief and the compromise that had been running so long it had become structural. She looked at the envelope in his hand and then back at his face. You're not staying, she said. No, Harry said. She nodded, the motion very small and very complete. Harry, she said. He waited. He gave her the full patience of the waiting, not impatiently, not with the performance of patience, but with actual room to say the thing, however long the getting to it took. I'm sorry, she said. The words came out smaller than they had been inside her. Harry could see this, could see the distance between the weight they had had in whatever internal space she had been carrying them and the size they made when they hit the air of the hallway. Small and fragile and real, not enough, not nothing, I know that's, she started. It doesn't fix anything, Harry said. She closed her eyes, but I heard it, he said. She stood in the hallway of number 4 in her pressed blouse with her hands at her sides and her eyes closed, and she looked for the first time in the morning like someone who was not performing anything. Just standing in a hallway with the evidence of 8 years of choices arranged around her in every dimension, with a nephew who had come back from the dead built from lightning and old iron to stand in her kitchen and drink cold tea and slide the bolt on a cupboard door. Harry turned. He walked to the front door. He stepped over the threshold and out onto the front path and did not duck this time. He had learned the angle in the morning's first crossing and the body remembered, and the learning was one more piece of information the house had given him without meaning to. The gate made its sound behind him. Privet Drive in the gray morning, the manicured hedges and the identical houses and the milk bottle still on the step of number 2 that no one had taken in. The telephone wires above the street running their low-frequency note that was not the telephone exchange's note. The pavement under his boots receiving each step with the particular communication of a surface that has been told something and cannot unhear it. Harry walked past number 7 and did not look at the window. He passed number 12 and the sparrows still hadn't come back to the guttering. He reached the end of the cul-de-sac and turned onto the main road and kept going, and behind him the clouds above Privet Drive, which had been building and gathering and waiting for the whole of the morning's duration, finally reached the point they had been building toward. They opened, not in rain, in light. A single discharge, horizontal, blue-white, and enormous, running the full length of Privet Drive from the oak at number 8 to the telephone pole at the cul-de-sac's mouth, not striking anything, not burning anything, not touching a single hedge or roof tile or garden gnome. Running between them 6 feet above the pavement, in the space between the ordinary world and the sky above it, illuminating everything it passed for the duration of 1 full second. Every house on Privet Drive, every window with its particular curtain, the gnome with its cracked smile, the empty trees, the milk bottle on number 2's step, the gate of number 4 still swinging slightly on its hinge. Lit entirely once hard, then dark, then the thunder rolling in from where the lightning had been, building as it rolled, deep and absolute and patient, the voice of the sky that had been waiting all morning to say something and had now said it. It rolled west. It rolled past the bounds of Privet Drive and past Surrey and out across the country, running along the electromagnetic field that Thor had been following when he descended 8 years ago, following the same line south to north in reverse, broadcasting at every frequency that the sky was capable of. Harry did not look back at it. He walked with the envelope in one hand and the smooth gray stone in his pocket and the morning around him, and the thunder followed him the way a tide followed the thing that called it, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the absolute assurance of something that had been moving in this direction since before the question was asked and would keep moving long after the question was answered. He had somewhere to be, he was going there. The thunder rolled behind him and the birds were returning to the trees and the street was becoming a street again, ordinary, suburban, the color of not showing dirt, and at the far end of it, growing smaller, number 4 stood in the gray summer light with its brass lion knocker and its cream curtains and its bolt on the cupboard door. The lightning scar on Harry's forehead caught the last of the discharge's light, one brief second of illumination. Then the ordinary gray of the morning closed back over it, and he was 12 years old and reforged and walking in the direction he had decided, and the world was ahead of him in every direction he chose to face. He did not look back. The thunder followed him out.